Decentering men doesn't mean that you don't talk to, interact with, form relationships, or just completely avoid men altogether. From my understanding, decentering men means that you build a life full of hobbies, interests, career, goals, and aspirations which aren't revolved around men. Generally speaking, women find it pretty hard to decenter men because many of us are raised and have been raised to be male centered to various extents. This is usually brought up through culture or the religion that we follow, or also the people who surround us, who teach us and instill these attitudes. The main issue with being male centered is the danger you can put yourself in. There's so many examples of women putting themselves in dangerous situations for a man. There are plenty of women who are in jail for being in possession of their boyfriend's drugs, being involved in murders, having children to keep a man who doesn't want to stay in the first place. Now, the man has left and the woman is by herself. And this means that the child or the children, in many cases, are the ones who end up suffering the most while being the most innocent in most of these situations. When people talk about decentering men, I've noticed many don't give actual practical ways in which you can start implementing into your everyday life and make a conscious effort to continue to do so. Decentering men is a process, and for many, it's going to be a lifelong process. So here are a few ways to start decentering men today, okay? Number one, understand that most men don't care about you. Unless it's a man who has a responsibility towards you, like your father, a husband, siblings, brothers, uncles, cousins. Outside of that bubble, most men do not care about your well-being, your safety, or anything that is of good interest to you. And I think one of the main reasons why women find it hard to reconcile with the fact that most men do not care about them is because women have been duped many times by men who seemed to be showing some sort of interest towards them. And a lot of women see that as an equivalent to the men caring about them, when 9 times out of 10, it is the complete opposite. And most of the times, the men sweet talking are usually sweet talking for one thing and one thing only. And that is usually found in between a woman's legs. I have to be brash about it because just too many women fall into these traps. Number 2, avoid overconsumption of male-centered content. Content such as videos on YouTube, TikTok videos. There's plenty of content about teaching women how to get a man. Oh, there's also books and movies like How to Think Like a Man, Why Men Love Bitches. Placing your sole focus on how men behave and then basing your actions on their supposed reactions or hypothetical reactions actually takes away from your very precious time, which could have been better spent doing something more productive. Rather than spending time on things that are mostly outside of your control. For instance, you can't force a man to like you, no matter what you do, no matter how you look like. Even if you are drop dead gorgeous, you have an amazing personality. If a man doesn't like you, he doesn't like you. Full stop. Now, there is some content out there about men that is male-centered. The content tends to be revolving around marriages, relationships, and what to expect and how to deal with certain issues that can pop up whilst being in relationships with men. That type of content can be very useful because many women do indeed want to get married to a man or want to have a relationship with a man, and a lot of women want to get married and build a family with a man. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. But it's still important to keep in mind when you are consuming this type of content. Make sure that you are selective about who you are listening to. Make sure that they're not always talking about how men are the ones who should be served, rather than how men and women should be served within a relationship. My next point is specific for my women of faith, especially those who grew up following the Abrahamic religions like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, but specifically Christianity. These religions are patriarchal, okay? Especially the religions that I have mentioned. They are patriarchal from a historical sense and also a doctrine sense. And oftentimes when we are taught about these religions, we are mostly taught by men and some women, but most religious teachers tend to be men. And oftentimes I've noticed that the teachings tend to be from a point of view of how the religion serves men more than they do women. And in this instance, I'm specifically talking about Christianity. This point of view is obviously biased, but I urge you to take a step back from listening to the outside noise and take a step back from listening to what other people are telling you about your religion. Take responsibility and start studying your religion by yourself and build that relationship with God. Don't be afraid to question certain customs that are practiced. This will not only strengthen your faith, and it will also, of course, help you understand how women and men are viewed and should be treated in the context of your religion. Because let's think about it. If you're going to follow a belief, you need to actually know what you are believing in and make sure that it actually makes sense to you. Otherwise, it's going to be very easy for people to manipulate your ignorance and also your vulnerability. And you don't want to fall into the trap of worshipping men rather than actually worshipping your God. Another way to actually decenter men is to stop believing certain stereotypes about the differences between men and women. The main one that sticks out to me is the whole notion of men being more logical and women being more emotional when it comes to their decision making, or just in general. I'll have to say, in some instances, this stereotype can be proven to be true, but there are also many instances when it's the complete opposite. And the reason why I say this is because from a young age, men are told to deal with situations by putting their emotions aside as if they're an afterthought, while women are allowed, for the most part, to have a cry and then move on. And these coping mechanism differences between men and women are based on societal and cultural norms, not on genetics. A man isn't more logical than you or smarter than you just because they are a man. It's due to the fact that their environment, these traits are usually based on the environment and the life that the person has lived. And you can easily debunk these stereotypes because you really don't have to look that far. How many men ruin their marriages that they spent building over the years, and they just ruin it by sleeping with another woman, regardless of whether he cared about the other woman or not? Does that sound like something that a logical person would do? Destroy a whole family for a one-night stand? That doesn't make any sense. No logical person or no person who is applying logical thinking is going to do that. Women who are less emotional, quote unquote, are often labeled as being masculine or acting like or trying to act like men, when in actuality, they are just putting their emotions to the side in the particular situation and applying their logical thinking. It has nothing to do with trying to be like a man. Another saying that I find pretty male-centered depending on the context, because context is important, is there's the saying that men are more dangerous than women towards other women. Now, physically speaking, yes, men are a lot more dangerous than women, and also a lot more violent than women. They're a lot more stronger. A man can literally destroy a woman in just a few punches. Literally. However, a lot of the times people don't take into account that someone can also be destroyed mentally and emotionally. And that is where, in my opinion, a lot of women excel in when it comes to destroying someone they don't like. In this one life that you have to be wary of everybody, regardless of their gender, until they prove that they aren't someone to be wary of. Women have destroyed other women just as much as men have destroyed other women. And to blindly believe that you'll be at your safest with other women is, in my opinion, setting women up and also setting yourself up, if that's what you think. Viewing women as completely innocent beings who can do no harm or less harm will make you actually minimize their abuse towards you. Imagine a girl is being bullied senselessly by another girl, and she'll just think it's not that bad compared to what a man could do to me, despite the fact that the bully has literally gone out of her way to make the girl's life a living hell, which can lead to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, all these ingredients that leads to the destruction of a person. And again, you don't have to look that far for examples of women being harmful towards other women. Ask most women who was behind the destruction of their self-esteem, or who was the first person who made them feel insecure about themselves, about their looks. Most likely, a lot of women are going to name another woman. Limit the time that you spend with male-centered people, or just plainly just avoid them, especially male-centered women. Extremely male-centered people, and I say people because yes, women can be very male-centered, but then also men can be very male-centered too. So we have to be aware of both sides. Extremely male-centered people usually end up in very dangerous situations, as I previously said. And you just being in close proximity to these people can endanger your life. You can spot a male-centered woman from a mile away because they base their whole decisions on what men think. From the clothes that they wear, to the places that they frequent, to the hobbies that they practice. And on the topic of developing hobbies and interests, make sure that you have other reasons outside of men for doing that hobby. Otherwise, it's all just going to be a performance. And you'll soon end up stopping because once you don't get the results you want, you'll think that there is no point. Or if you end up in a relationship, you'll feel like you've changed because you're no longer performing those hobbies or interests that you pretended to like to attract a man. Most women are like this, end up having an existential crisis. And that is why so many women say that they end up losing themselves when they're in a relationship. They don't know who they are outside of pursuing a man, even when they have a man. Also, be aware of those friends, and I say friends in quotation marks, who want to embarrass you in front of their guy friends or just guys in general. It's very clear that when they do that, they're just trying to use you as a way to make themselves look good by making you look bad. A common phrase or name that is used a lot when talking about decentering men is pick me or pick Misha. I think pick Misha comes from Shira 7, and that's like the catchphrase for describing a woman who is extremely male-centered. And whilst I do think that we still, as the feminine collective, we should still call out that type of we should still call out pick me behavior. We also at the same time need to take a step back. And before we go on to call another woman a pick me, let's check ourselves first, okay? One of the traits of a male-centered person is that they're very quick to call other women names or degrade another woman when they do something that they don't like or disagree with when it pertains to a man. And the reason why I say to check yourself before you point fingers at other women and call them pick-me's is because I can guarantee that most likely most women, if not all women, have done some pick-me stuff before in their lifetimes. No one is inherently better than the other, but we can definitely be better than our previous selves. Decentering men also starts with decentering the men in your own family. Let me explain. In a lot of families, in pretty much most communities actually, especially in the Black communities, there is an obvious gender hierarchy. And a lot of the times, the men or the boys in the family are at the top of the food chain, even when it is not deserved. And that means that oftentimes, men in the family can get away with doing a lot more wrong things than women can, and end up experiencing little to no scrutiny from other family members. Decentering the men in your family means that you don't make excuses for their wrongdoings. If they've done something wrong, you acknowledge that they've done something wrong and you don't make excuses for them. You hold them accountable as well, and you also hold the enablers, men and women alike, accountable too. So here are a few ways in which you can actually start to decenter men today. What are your ways of decentering men? Let me know in the comments section and I'll see you in the next one.